Hey, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to my midlife crisis. If you're new to the channel, I'm Craig, and this is my 2015 McLaren 650S Spider. If you've been following the channel, we've been doing repairs, restoration, rebuilding it, making it my own. And in today's video, we're gonna add a very personal custom modification. If you're like me and you are a McLaren enthusiast through and through, you probably lust over the P1. Now, with only 375 P1s ever built for the world, maybe 20 to 30 variants like the GTR or the LM out there, it's very unlikely that I will ever get an opportunity to own one, drive one, let alone sit in one. So I'm gonna take it on my own to add a little bit of P1 to my McLaren 650. What I have in this box is McLaren OEM, old new stock, brand new from a McLaren P1. And I'm gonna be adding it to my McLaren 650S. Now, if you've been following the channel for a long time, you'll know one of the most basic modifications that I've done to all my cars, whereas my Mercedes-AMG GTS from the past, my Porsche GT4, is I put in a brand new carbon fiber steering wheel. And then, so I thought, well, you know what? We've already done the custom interior in the McLaren 650S. Maybe it's time we add a customized steering wheel. So I started looking into it. I looked at Carismo, I looked on eBay, and basically all the prices were, you know, over $2,000. And if I'm gonna spend that kind of money, I wanna have something that is absolutely one of a kind and something that I'll love putting my hands on and being behind the wheel of. So just like I always do, you know, every day, probably peruse eBay, you know, 20, 30 minutes, looking at McLaren parts, you know, secondhand, anything that might be something I need to repair or replace on my McLaren 650S. And I came across what I thought was probably the holy trinity, not the holy trinity, the holy grail of something that I would want to be behind on my McLaren 650S. A brand new McLaren P1 steering wheel. Brand new Alcantara, brand new carbon, complete with an airbag. As you can see, it's never even been used, never been installed. I've got full carbon fiber shifters. It is a complete McLaren P1 steering wheel. Now the question is, can I fit a McLaren P1 steering wheel onto a McLaren 650S? All my research and everything that I've looked at says I can. Now, obviously, I'm not gonna be able to use the DRS or the iPass button. They're gonna be nothing more than, you know, beauty, if you would. As I drive along and pretend that I've got, you know, a drag reduction system and a hybrid battery with extra boost for iPass. But that doesn't matter. If I was gonna spend this much money on a custom steering wheel and I have the opportunity for less of a price to add a McLaren P1 steering wheel to my McLaren 650S, you know as hell I was gonna take advantage of it. So let's kind of go over the steering wheel and everything that's gonna take to do a steering wheel replacement on a McLaren P11 chassis car with a little bit of extra flair with it being a P1 steering wheel. First thing that we need to do before we replace any steering wheel or airbag is we need to disconnect the negative power terminal from the battery. So in the McLaren 650S, it is in the front. I'm not gonna bore you with taking out all the pins and everything that's related to taking out the backside of the McLaren 650S front. I've already done that. So let's go ahead and just pull out back half. Now to disconnect the negative battery terminal, we're gonna do a 10mm socket. We're just gonna loosen enough to remove the terminal. So after we unscrew it, we're just gonna pop it off. We're just gonna lay it to the side right there. Now you don't need to remove the IBS or the Intelligent Battery System, a management system connector. Just remove the negative terminal from the battery. All right, before we jump into taking off the McLaren 650S airbag and steering wheel, I just wanna take a peek at the McLaren P1 steering wheel and show you guys what the internals look like, because once we get off the McLaren 650S steering wheel, there's differences. We may stop. I already pre-took off the airbag. We're gonna go ahead and set that aside. As you can see from the inside here, we've got our ground, which is gonna be obviously for the horn. We also have the electronics connector. So this is gonna go into the clock spring on my McLaren 650S, and we're just gonna go ahead and put that back into the hole there. That's all that's really all entailed into it. So in order to take off the airbag, what you need to do is, and it's gonna be easier to show you here on this one since it's already off, is you'll notice right here at the very back, there's these little dimples. We're taking an H4 Allen, something very thin. Could be a screwdriver, could be, but I recommend an Allen because it has a little flat edge. You're gonna be gently pushing that inside, and you're only pushing it in about a ½ an inch. And if you'll notice, there's a little spring. You're gonna be pushing that spring, and what it's gonna do is it's going to release the one side of the spring holding the airbag in. And so you'll do that to both sides. You have a dimple on both sides. So let's go get the steering wheel from the McLaren 650S off and see if our wiring is the same. Again, using our H4 Torx, we're going to find the same dimples on the 650S steering wheel. Gonna go ahead and poke it in there. And as you see, it released the one side. Now we have to do it to the other side. And boom, it pops off. And now our airbag is loose. You'll notice that the wiring is a little twisted, and they do that from the factory. It makes it so that when you put the wiring in, it does not pinch when it comes into this little shroud right here as the metal gets in there. So we're going to go ahead and we're gonna basically untwist it a couple turns, and that's just going to give us a little bit more room. So for the airbag, you're going to have basically 3 connections. You're going to have the 2 yellow ones, which go to both sides of the charge of the airbag, and then you're going to have that ground wire that we need to take off. Using a flat tip screwdriver, something small, you're going to basically take these little orange clips and you're going to push them up one at a time, being gentle. Don't, try to, and then boom, they just pop off. And the nice part about these connectors is once that's up, they just pull off. And you can't mess them up because they're color coded. You got one that's like a baby blue, and you got one that's a yellow. Now here on the ground, that just slides on and off. There's a little handle on the side, and boom, your airbag is completely off. So right there, that is the last connector. That is your clock spring electronics connector. Now we need to take a little flat tip in there and go ahead and pull that out, being very careful. Pop your flat tip screwdriver in there, push and depress that, and then it's gonna go ahead and pull out, and that is your connector for all your electronics. Looks identical to the one for the P1, so hopefully our pinout and everything else is going to be correct. That is the connector coming from the wiring harness into the steering rack that plugs in for the electronics for my McLaren 650S. Now, obviously in the McLaren 650S steering wheel, there's no electronics. There's no DRS, there's no iPass, there's the paddle shifters, there's the horn, and that's it. So it's a very, very simple steering wheel. All of those 12 pins, they don't have wires in them, and they only have one wire going into that connect. So now let me take you over and show you what the P1 steering wheel has. So that is the electronics connector, same 12-pin connector, but it has 2 separate sets of wires going into that 12-pin connector, and the color code is not exactly the same. So let me take you through the differences in the color codes from pins 1 through 12. Apologies for my crude, really quick drawing. So this is the 650S steering wheel. So in pin 1, we've got green, then we've got brown, we've got a light brown, then we've got 3 empty slots, no pins, no wires in those. Then we come down to the bottom, we've got empties for the first 4, then we've got a maroon, and then we've got a brown. Now the P1 is a lot busier. Some of the nice things I'm hoping that come out is we've got green in pin 1. We got what's white brown, could be just brown by itself. Then we got an orange, so could be corresponding to the light brown. Then we've got 2 empties, just like the 650S, but then we've got a white green that doesn't correlate to anything on the 650S. Going down to the bottom, we've got a whole bunch of stuff that does not necessarily correlate. We've got a white, gray, blue, black, and then we've got what looks to be like a red and brown, which kind of correlates potentially to the maroon and brown down here. So I'm hoping that all the functionality and the wires and everything pinned out between the 2 steering wheels for what the 650S needs are the same, and these extra ones are for DRS, iPass, other features that are just not gonna work, which we didn't expect them to work. This is what I was worried about. What are the differences? Are we gonna have a bunch of codes? Are we gonna have a bunch of lights on the steering wheel? Is everything that I need going to work on the P1 steering wheel, fitting it on the McLaren 650S? There's only one way we're gonna find out. So the last thing we have to take off in order for our steering wheel is this Allen right here in the middle that's holding the steering wheel onto the clock spring. Now you'll notice this white, that's the torque mark for where that needs to go back to. Now in this Allen bolt here, this is 10mm Allen. So probably gonna need a breaker bar, might need a friend to hold the steering wheel. Before you do this, make sure that the steering wheel is straight. The wheels are all lined up straight, because at this point right now, where the clock spring is, we're going to need to remember that. We're gonna need to not touch that as we take this steering wheel off. All right, we got everything disconnected. We're gonna take our breaker bar with our 10mm Allen, and we're going to now, I already broke this with a friend offline. Definitely, it's broke already, so it's not gonna be some dramatic, me breaking the bolt, but I'll tell you this, it is a pretty tight torque spec. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take the Allen bolt out. And there it is. A little bit of blue Loctite on there, so we'll put some blue Loctite when we put this bad boy back on. Now, you don't want to just yank it off. You want to make sure that you keep the clock spring in the same spot. So you're just going to gently kind of rock it and just shake it because it's on the splines, and you want to make sure that you don't like yank it, pull any wires, anything like that. So you're just going to gently take it off. And now you want to feed your airbag connectors through that little hole. And voila, we are off with the McLaren steering wheel. That wasn't that bad at all. Kind of make note of where your clock spring is. I got a little trick here, just to, to peace of mind, make sure that clock spring doesn't have an issue. So I'm probably overdoing it a little bit. I'm gonna take a little bit of painter's tape and just make sure that clock spring does not move. Basically kind of secure it in place. So we have a little bit of peace of mind as we're going about putting on the new steering wheel. And I'll pull this obviously out once we have the new steering wheel on. If you notice here on the clock spring, there's this basically kind of a placement pin on the top and then on the bottom. And there's literally on the back of the steering wheel, you'll see it kind of lock in there and lock in the top. That's when you know you have it on the clock spring properly. And so when we take the P1 steering wheel, we want to make sure that those line up. So let's go get the P1 steering wheel and get it on there. Now the P1 steering wheel has the same exact kind of placement pins that the 650S one, so it looks identical. Let's see if we can get that lined up and on. We're gonna have to feed these one at a time through that steering wheel hole. All right, we got the baby blue one through. All right, we got both of those coming through. Let's try to sync this on. So to get it on, you're gonna have to kind of line up the splines. Go and pull off the tape. Like I said, that was me just being overly cautious, probably kind of stupid. And you just kind of wiggle it on, and then it's on. Now, to get this plugged into the clock spring, we're gonna go ahead and take off this kind of, I call it a shroud. It's basically what the springs and the mechanism for the airbag plug into. It just makes it easier to get that plugged into. So let me go get a Torx. So this is a T30 Torx. And we're just gonna keep it on very low. There we go. Okay, now that's gonna give us better access to get that plugged in. Now it's important, these two airbags, one's to the top, one's to the bottom, and this plugs right in between. So let's go ahead and get this plugged in. Flat tip helps you guide it just a little bit. And click, we are in. We've got our new steering wheel plugged into the clock spring, and we will put these in very softly, and don't tighten them all down at the same time. Now this is where you have some depression for your horn, so. All right, got those put in. I'm gonna go ahead and press it down, but not press it all the way down so that we have the horn won't work. Still got enough room for the horn. That looks so cool, I'm so excited. All right, now that we got the blue Loctite on, we've cinched that in, got it hand tight. Now, I was speaking with Kevin from MCMEDICS SUPERCAR Garage Atlanta, and he said that the torque spec for the steering wheel is 50 Nm or 37 feet-pounds, so let's get this set up. And this may require a friend again. We're gonna try to do it on our own. And that white line should go right back to where it was. And we got a satisfying click, and we are back in business. Back on. Now let's get our airbag on. All right, we got the P1 airbag. We just gotta follow our color code. First thing we're gonna do though is we're gonna put on our ground. That just slides on the little bracket. There. Now we stick our baby blue where the baby blue goes. Got the baby blue one in there. Now let's get the yellow, and we'll cinch down our two orange clips that hold them in. And remember guys, we got to twist so that they don't hit. We push on our airbag. One side, two side, good. That looks killer. Now I'm afraid we got to turn the battery back on and see if it works. I'm very, very nervous. Are you guys nervous? I'm nervous. Hopefully this works, and then we'll go out and we'll take it for a drive. Gonna get our negative terminal back on to our battery. Probably get a couple sparks, and you'll hear the car come back on. Sink that in. Sink our 10 mil down. Nice and tight. Well, the McLaren P1 steering wheel, it's in, it fits perfect. No airbag lights, no steering problems. It's time to get this on a road. Thanks for watching. If you like this type of McLaren content, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a big thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.